talking now to Sue Foley. Sue, why don't you tell me first, what brought you to Austin? You're originally from Canada, right?
That's right. I came here in the early 90s to record for Antone's Records. So I came here, I was here most of the 90s, and then I was away for probably a couple of decades in between, but now I'm back. But yeah, I'm here for the blues scene. I'm here because of people like Jimmy Vaughn and Luann Barton and Stevie Ray and, just people like that, the music scene that drew us down from Canada.
And what about the music scene itself? I mean, was there a blues, like any kind of local blues scene where you grew up?
Oh yeah, there was. There was, from the time I got into blues, there was a really strong scene. There was a lot of people who are passed away now that were on the scene touring, like a lot of blues legends. We basically saw all of them, during our first 10 years in the business. But so there was a pretty robust scene up in Canada because a lot of Chicago acts came up there. People like Coco Taylor and Buddy Guy, Virginia Wells, and just the whole Chicago scene was up in Canada a lot. So we got to see a lot of people.
Did you ever get to meet any of them personally?
Yes, we did, and toured with them. Did a lot of touring here at Antone's in Austin. We played with all the blues legends that came through the club. So I got a pretty good education in the art form.
Speaking of education, I understand that you are working toward a PhD. Could you tell me a bit about how, is that true?
Yes. So I got my master's in 15, I think. And I just decided to carry it forward. And so I'm working on a PhD in musicology. My dissertation will be on pioneering women guitar players. So it's just kind of a big study that I've been working on for many years, just about the history of women in guitar and the scene today. Yeah.
One thing, I had read an interview where you talked about, Guitar Woman and that project. Could you give some background into that?
Well, that's based around the series of interviews I started in the early 2000s. So I started interviewing women guitar players. I did about 100 interviews and stockpiled them away. So I've been working on a book, using those interviews as sort of the backdrop of it. And then my dissertation is sort of tied in with the same kind of, with more of a research-based part. So it's all tied into a big project that by the time I'm finished, I think will really be a nice, well-rounded kind of thing. Yeah.
And where are you going for your PhD?
That's York University in Toronto.
One thing I notice is that in the blues, there are a lot of more examples of prominent female guitar players, not just you, but also Rory Block and Bonnie Raitt, and earlier Memphis Minnie. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think people like Memphis Minnie really paved the way for us. I think the blues has always had a strong female presence. Even with the singers, the first blues stars were women. People like Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith, and the big blues stars, they were women, and I think it's just always had a history of strong women, and a lot of acceptance towards female instrumentalists, because when I was coming up, there was, besides Rory and Bonnie, there was people like Debbie Davies, Deborah Coleman, Joanna Connor, and Susan Tedeschi, and these were kind of all, we kind of all came up together, and now there's Carolyn Wonderland, who's a few years younger than me. There's just a lot of women guitar players in blues right now, like Samantha Fish, there's, just a lot, yeah.
Wonderful. Certainly I remember Janis Joplin was another woman who was definitely influenced by those same artists you mentioned, like Bessie.
Mama Thornton, and for sure. I think it's just always been really accepting, and it's a great way for women to express themselves freely, and there's a lot of sort of open, freedom in it, sexual freedom, expression, And then there's also a lot of skills involved with being a good musician. So a lot of these people that we're mentioning, they're also all excellent musicians, and we can't take that for granted, that blues is a skill set, and learning to play is a real skill, and it's just been, there's just a long history, and I really think Memphis Minnie had a huge impact on, well, she certainly had a huge impact on me, but I know she's had a huge impact on thousands of people, millions probably by this time.
One thing you notice, though, I mean, even though she's influential, she isn't mentioned as often as a guitarist as people like, I don't know, who could I think of? Hubert Sumlin, or what other guitar players?
B.B. King, or, there's, well, and she's still sort of an anomaly, but hopefully, I think she really had a huge impact, but when she died, she still was kind of obscure. And what happened, I think, with Minnie is she wasn't able to, there's no interviews with Minnie, there's no videos, there's only like stories, second and third hand accounts, by this time third hand accounts, because nobody's alive anymore. So, like, I think that had a big impact, the fact that her career ended in the 1950s because she had a stroke and couldn't play anymore. So she wasn't able to capitalize on the folk boom when they were bringing back all these artists. Had she been alive and playing, then no doubt she would have been rediscovered and had a bigger profile. But her career ended in the 50s, and she just never, she was obscure. She just she had a stroke, and she was in poor health, and she died in 1973, sort of in obscurity,
And that's sad when you look at people like maybe Mississippi John Hurt, who was rediscovered in the 60s, decades after he retired.
Right. So, but someone like Elizabeth Cotton, who's another wonderful guitar player, she was discovered in the folk boom. So, there's all kinds of stories. Minnie's is one story, but there's a lot of people that carry on her tradition and really talk about her a lot. She was a really important figure, and to me, she's my favorite artist of all time. So I'm very passionate about her. But to me, she was sort of like a beacon, because when I started playing guitar and I got into blues, it's like you said, it was mostly men that I learned about: Freddie King, B.B. King, T-Bone Walker. And they're all amazing. I love them all. But when I discovered Minnie, it was all of a sudden there was a woman talking to me, and it hit me completely differently. It just hit me differently, because it was like I was like, oh my God, she's doing it. I can do this too. She had the courage to go forth and go into this territory, and God knows the things she encountered at that time, and we know some of them. So I think that has made our trail all a little easier. So, you know what I mean? She kind of took the brunt of the shit in a way.
I'm reminded of an interview I read, it's a different field, Joan Jett, who was inspired by Suzi Quatro in the early 70s, seeing Suzi Quatro on stage playing bass.
Right. And I interviewed Suzi Quatro, and she's amazing, and I agree. And Suzi Quatro is like one of the first, I call her the first rock chick. She's a real innovator. She innovated an image for women in rock and roll that we still, and it's almost like an archetype that we still abide to this day. The leather pants, you know what I mean? The whole sort of tomboy vibe. That's all Suzi Quatro. She did that. Yeah.
I'm reminded of Sister Rosetta Tharpe, too, who's just getting her due as a pioneer of rock and roll.
Right. And that's another one. But I think she got more notoriety because I think she really was a pretty big star in her time. Kind of controversial. But she definitely is getting her due now, and she's so exceptional. Wow, what a musician. What an incredible... we don't even have... obviously these are women we're talking about. But if you just look at their musicality, it doesn't matter that they were women. They're just really good. They were really way above it, like the norm, like extremely good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's where the inspiration for me lies. And the fact that they were able to go through what any challenges they had to go through because of whatever female things that impeded their journey, but they still rose to the top. Yeah.
I was wondering, on one of your albums you worked with Jimmy Vaughn and Billy Gibbons. How did that come about, and what was that like?
It was incredible, and I still get to play with those guys. We have a band called the Jungle Show that plays it yearly in Austin, and I see Jimmy Vaughn a lot. I see both of them quite a lot. They're amazing musicians. They're really supportive. They've been great mentors to me and cheerleaders, and I love them to death. I think they're both legends and two of the finest musicians I know. So it was a huge thrill. And that was brought about by our producer, Mike Flanagan, who really works with both those guys and was able to bring them into the fold when we made the Ice Queen album.
I'm wondering if you knew Stevie Ray Vaughan as well as Jimmy.
I didn't, because I got to Austin in 1990 in February. He passed away in August. And I met him once that year and shook his hand. And I saw him play twice. But, yeah, he was just gone too quick.
That I remember hearing about when he passed away. And I'm just thinking he had, for one thing, an amazing voice and an amazing guitar style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely his own. He was a monster of a musician, yeah. So, very influential. And he really single-handedly put blues back on the map. And that's what brought us to Austin, because he not only put blues on the map, he put Austin, Texas on the map. Because his stardom and fame, and his first album broke out, and everybody in blues paid attention. We were like, who's that? It came out like a supernova. So that, for me in Canada, that was sort of like put Austin in my head. I was like, what's going on in Austin? You know? So that's why I'm here today, when I think about it.
It definitely seems like blues goes in cycles in terms of popularity. There are times when it ebbs, and there are times when it comes back. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. You can even see it as far as the 60s British invasion bands that made it popular again and brought all those American bands, all those American acts back to popularity and notoriety. And then Stevie Ray's influence, and even today I think it's in a really strong place.
Who were some of your role models as blues musicians when you were starting out?
A lot of the people we've talked about already, like Minnie is a huge role model, but I studied, and I spent a lot of time studying just all the what they call the masters, I guess you would say, Howlin' Wolf, B.B. King, and you kind of Freddie King, go down the list. But I still do study that stuff quite intensely. So just all of them, really. But then the people we got to tour with too was cool. Like we toured with Coco Taylor, and it was just cool to see such a strong woman out there, and the way she fronted a band and commanded the audience. Buddy Guy, still to this day, he's still touring and still amazing in his late 80s. Crazy. Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah, he's amazing, and he still works really hard. That's really inspirational, because blues is a kind of music you can grow old in, and gracefully. You can really grow old and still really work and have an impact on people. So I really love that. I've always loved the element of age with this music, because I'm older now too.
One thing you notice about, especially like the blues women, could be pretty raunchy.
Right.
They long before people talk now about, for instance, Cardi B or earlier Madonna, but then you go back to Bessie Smith, for instance, and she was singing some pretty explicit material too.
Yes, she was. And I used to go see Etta James, and Etta was very raunchy, and she was a big woman, and she just moved her body around very sexually, and she was not ashamed, and she was So yeah, I think the blues has always had that element too. It's really demystified. It was a pure sort of expression, a pure human expression, and sexuality is part of that, besides just emotions and feelings and love and all the other things that make us human, but our sexual nature is a huge part of that too.
Could you tell me a bit about your most recent album, Pinkies Blues? I understand, it was done as a 3-piece, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, we recorded it live in the studio, and when I say we recorded it live, I mean we did not overdub on this album. Everything is done in real time. We're playing together. So what you're hearing is a real band playing in the moment. There's no tracking. There's no extra bells and whistles, and that's a very unusual way to record right now when you think of it. Most people track things. They'll do the bass tracks or the drum tracks first, and then put things on top of it and layer it and structure it. And this is a lot, when you're doing it like that, like we did it, you can't, any mistakes you make are there, but all the energy stays really pure and spontaneous, and that's what we want to do. And so it's live, it's a guitar record. Pinky is my guitar, my famous Pink Paisley Telecaster. It's just like a strident blues, straight up, real honest record, and I'm real happy with it. Yeah.
Do you prefer playing live in the studio?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, I'm basically a live player, so what I do is play live. So if we can create that environment in the studio, I'm happy, because then you don't have to seek anything. It's just right there.
I have just one final question. What advice would you give to young musicians who are starting out?
Just to take their time and really work on the craft. I mean, I think today there's so much pressure with young musicians, especially to be on social media and to be creating this image and that I'm not sure they spend as much time just actually sitting in their rooms and playing live. And for us, that was what the whole journey was about, and it really makes a big difference, especially when you're going on a longevity thing, because obviously all imagery and everything fades, but skills don't fade, and you need to create real skills and craftsmanship, and really just be married to the craft and the work, and not get too involved in all the bullshit, because there's a whole bunch of that.